Mom? Mom? Mom?
What? What's wrong?
They won't go away.
Who won't go away?
The numbers. Zeros and ones.
What do you mean?
I see data.
When do you see it? In your dreams?
All the time. It's everywhere.
You don't have to be afraid of it. This is your gift, your advantage. You see potential that others don't. Accept it. Learn to understand it. Harness it.
And then?
You know what they say, with great power, you can make a lot of money.
Open data. Don't be afraid. Get your business cape on today and explore with us how to see data.
So thank you so much for joining us on what is a lovely, really strange and warm day here in Waterloo. We're going to talk for a few minutes just briefly about what ODX is, and I will kind of set up a presentation and introduce Devin, and then Devin will get into the meat of it. And then my colleague Michael Chan will also follow up with some information on the ODX Ventures program. So thanks very much to everybody who's attending, and thank you also for standing by as we made sure that all the tech was working properly. My name is Joseph, and I am the data entrepreneur in residence here at ODX. So my job is, amongst other things, to help companies discover and use open data, which tends to be free data collected and released by various levels of government here in Canada. And I also do product management and product development for ODX. So we've been around for about a year and a half. And for those of you who don't know us, we were funded largely by the federal government with a mandate to help Canadian companies build value, create jobs, and drive growth using open data. So open data has been a thing in Canada for a number of years, and various levels of governments have spent a fair amount of money trying to release data, build portals, and build a community of practice around open data. And so we are just helping that, we're helping that process continue on. We have a couple of different initiatives that you might have heard of. One is something we're doing called the OD 150, where we're trying to build an inventory of every company in Canada that's making commercial use of open data. We've been at this since the beginning of the year. We're up to about 83 companies now, something like that. So if any of you folks work for a company that's already making use of open data and have not filled the survey out, please let me know. Pop a message in chat or shoot me an email after the fact. Or head to our website and find the link to the OD 150 and please fill it out, because the more folks that we have who we know are using open data, the better position we are to come up with products and services and funding programs that can help companies do cool things with open data in their business. So that's the gist of it. This is the second webinar that we've run. We're trying to run them every other month. So the last one was around the end of July, so we're not quite on pace yet. We'll be doing another one Tuesday, December 6th at the same time. I'm just trying to finalize the speaker, but it will likely be, again, Tuesday the 6th, same time slot, and similar sort of idea where we bring in folks from the private sector who are doing interesting things with open data to talk a little bit about their company and also share lessons learned. Devin Tu, of course, is CEO of MapYourProperty. And MapYourProperty, like a lot of companies, is a company that's doing a lot of really interesting things with open data and public data, and specifically geospatial data. And as folks who've done any work with GIS probably know, GIS, geographic information systems, are this own special world within information technology. And when you're dealing with open data sets and trying to lay them on top of maps and other sets of geographic data, it can be really challenging. And so I know Devin's got some great and really interesting things to tell us about some of the suffering that he went through to build up the MYP business and MYP product into what it is today. So with that, I'll let Devin get going. And again, as I said, there's going to be some time for questions at the end of Devin's presentation. And then Michael will also talk for a few minutes about ODX Ventures for those of you who are interested in that program. And so with that, Devin, take it away.
Yeah. Can everyone hear me right now? Yeah, I guess so. I hope so. If anybody can't hear me, please put in the chat. Just due to internet stuff, I'm going to go a little slower, or if I speak too fast, please let me know. So yeah, and Joseph, thank you so much for bringing me on to this webinar, and ODX has been really great help. I've talked to them in Waterloo several times. They've been out to all the open data functions, so they're a very active organization, and I really appreciate that, because there's a lot of people. We need more people in the open data community to, demand for more data to help businesses. So yeah, I'm going to start this presentation. So give me 1 second. I can't really see the screen. So I'm just going to leave this slide here, if you don't guys mind, instead of full screen, so I can be able to see the chat. A little bit. So here we go. So a little bit about the topic today, or the webinar today, is essentially streamlining real estate due diligence with open data. And the theme of this is open data for business. So I'm going to do a few assumptions. I'm going to assume you guys know what open data is, and I'm going to definitely stick to more the business theme. How do we bring open data for businesses? How do you use it to, as Joseph said, commercialize your data? And how do you make money off of it and bring it into a business? So a little bit of background of me is that I have a open data real estate startup company called MapYourProperty. We started almost 2-3 years ago, and now we're backed by some of the biggest condo developers and being used by some of the biggest municipal law firms. And so I guess the first part of my presentation, I'm going to just go through some poll questions that you guys can see on the bottom corner of your screen that says poll, and you can wait, or you can just jump ahead and answer those. And that will kind of help you guide us through all the problems that I face using open data and trying to get it into a usable form for business use, for consumer use, people to understand. So I'm just going to move on to this next screen. So a little bit about us and a little bit of background of open data and why I can present on open data. The Deputy Premier, Deb Matthews, attended our launch because we're an open data startup company, and the Ontario government's a big proponent of open data. We also have been in meetings with City of Toronto, Region of York, and I'm on a advocacy grassroots open data group, and we're looking to advocate to the Deputy Premier and the Ontario government for more data that they're going to release. They've released a lot of data, but they haven't released the data that we want. So I can talk about that at the end. Quickly, we have some of the largest condo developers using our platform. We're Silicon Valley backed, and we have some of the top NRU ranked law firms, including the number 1, number 3, and number 5 ranked law firms in the City of Toronto. We're backed by Ryerson University. I'm not going to go through that. And the last thing is, before I start, is what is the problem that I had for my company where I thought I really needed open data? And so MapYourProperty essentially streamlines real estate due diligence in 30 seconds. And we can aggregate more than 45 different data sets in a matter of seconds. And what happened to me as a planner is that I would have to look up these PDF maps. I'd have to go to the city, wait in line, look at binders, wait in line for this right information, and only to find that the development I was looking at or the advice that I'd give out to consumers or businesses was wrong, or it took me 2 or 3 days. And that was one of the biggest frustrations. So that's where I saw a key problem. And now I took that problem that I faced and I created a Google Maps on steroids, where we have all those different data layers on there, which I'll show to you a little bit later, but you can click through them easily on this online platform, and you can instantly make decisions at your fingertips. And that's one of the biggest things. The power of open data is you can use that data and the analytics to do what people take weeks to do to a matter of seconds. So does anybody have any questions so far? We can put in the chat, or we're going to move on, I guess. So let me know, and Joseph, let me know if you want to pause and take questions. So the next slide I have is a business slide of how we pitch the value of open data and the value of our platform. And the reason I put this slide up right here is because the reason we put this slide up here is because you have to really explain how open data is useful to the consumer or for the business that wants to pay you to get access to this data. So one of the 3 things we say is the capacity to do more with less. So using your business SaaS platform or accessing your open data that you've commercialized and provided, you will increase capacity for that business who's subscribing to you or who's using your data. Therefore, you have more staff resources to focus on more complex decisions, and you are able to speed that up. So we always talk about capacity. We do it like you have one planner and it takes 3 months for you to analyze all that information for land development. And then we say MapYourProperty, using 45 different open data sets, can do it in a matter of a few days. And then the second biggest thing, which I know all you guys know, is access to high quality information. Like our clients and your clients, they're able to access this much more accurate information at their fingertips instantly. So once again, you don't have to wait in line at the City of Toronto. I don't have to go walk around my neighborhood to find out my nearest school. All this stuff is painful stuff. And now with open data, you have high quality to access to really high quality information that's very accurate down to the property level, down to the census level, and then you can make decisions. And then the third one on a business side is you're gaining a competitive advantage, or your customer you're selling to has a competitive advantage over their other competitors. So we all say this with developers. Will be like, Tridel in Toronto, might get a competitive edge over Menkes because all is competing for the same land. And using our open data sources and our open data platform, you can stay ahead of it. So that's kind of something big that people tend to forget, is that while I have open data, how do I present that to our customer? And not to go too much into this, but this was one of our weaknesses when we launched our company, is we just provided data, but we never told them value or the ROI, the return on investment. And you definitely have to hit these 3 points to them in a meeting, or they don't even care what kind of data you have if they don't see any value. So if everyone has the poll questions down here on the bottom left-hand corner, please click those answers and vote. And so I guess the question is, what is the best source for upcoming, not current data, but upcoming open data? Track news announcements, A, and the open data website, B, grassroots open data coalition groups, or C, other startup businesses. So if you guys can vote in there. And Joseph, tell me if people are voting. So I'm going to vote myself. Oh, and I actually realized maybe that poll question isn't there. So if you want to type in the chat window what you think your answer is, that would be great. So I'm going to put A. B? Okay, Laura said B. B, A. Cool. Oh. Well, I think both people are correct. It's both A and B, but actually, with my participation with Grassroots Open Data Coalition Group, we find out more about what data is coming up ahead because we're advocating for that certain data as a collaborative group, and we're really been a great powerhouse for that. So I think the answer is more like B because A, governments, throughout Canada like to make news announcements that are safe data or data that they know is easy to do a PR piece, but not necessarily data that you want. So, for example, property data, planning data, census data, postal code data, I know that the feds are trying to get released. Those data are more important, and you'd only find that, unfortunately, through a lot of talking with, open data advocates in the community. So once again, community networking for open data businesses is really important. And so our next question, which now you can answer in the polls, and apologies for that. So what is the difference between City of Toronto data, York Region data, and Ontario MNR data? The first one is A, static versus dynamic URLs to pull that data down. Or to access open data, you can do web page via web page versus receiving an email. Or C, the difference is that they all have metadata versus some that you have to look up the date or the metadata in the attribute file. Or D, all of above. And Michael said, so is everybody able to vote? Or if you can't vote, there we go. There's some votes coming in right now. So if you can't vote, also put it in the chat, but I'm seeing a couple votes down. Cool. So keep voting, but yeah, I mean, obviously the answer is D, and some people answered C, which is a big problem, which I know a lot of you guys have seen. So on the next slide, just to kind of answer your question is, if we compare City of Toronto to York Region data or MNR data, and you'll find this also in Vancouver and also in the States, is some data has static URLs, which is very easy to pull. City of Toronto is really good. Property data is always, toronto.ca/property.zip. And York Region and MNR data is a lot more difficult to use because they use a thing called geocortex and they pull from the database live. So the URL changes a lot. And why is this a problem? Well, if you want to create automated software that pulls every month and you don't want to have to manually monitor this, then this is a big problem. So we have to write scripts that are slightly more dynamic, and we have to manually do some more process to get Region of York and MNR data. And so that's to the second line. City of Toronto, we can do automated pulls, and it's super fast. So we update every time there's a change, our scripts automatically identify that. Versus MNR or York Region data, which is the Ministry of Natural Resources data or York Region data, you have to email a request and they'll come in 2 or 3 hours. A lot of people said the answer to this one, which was attribute lookup table versus file modification date. And what I mean by that is scripts can detect when the City of Toronto updates their data automatically because it's embedded in the zip file. And that gets a little technical, but that saves us a lot of time. Versus Region of York, for example, we had to figure out and ask them how many times a week did they update their property data. And they told us they update it bi-weekly. So we have to manually check that every time. And so these are some things when you're trying to aggregate open data for your business that you have to look out for. Because if we didn't, previously we hadn't looked at this information, and it caused us a lot of problems because our data was out of date. So we kind of learned all these things by trial by fire. So any businesses out there with open data, I recommend you look at these technical details, because when you start commercializing it, it can really give you problems, because the lawyers, the developers, or whoever you're servicing always ask, how up to date is the site? The last two I'm not going to go through, but some sites crash a lot. York, region of York, their parcel data downloads always crash, and we have problems with that. Sometimes City of Toronto servers crash randomly overnight. So that's a big problem. So the biggest solution we had for a lot of these things is trial and test and talking to the cities. We have great relationships with the cities. I know a lot of people, and I'll give them a call or an email, and I'll ask them to explain some of that data, and usually they're really useful to that. So is there any other questions? I'm just going to look at this chat window, see if there's any other questions. Okay, great. So moving on, we're going kind of into the case study situation. So I guess some things you really have to look at when pulling open data for businesses is reviewing open data is really time consuming. And so, and acquiring this data is manually is time consuming. So for example, we used to aggregate 1 million parcels, property parcels on a bi-weekly basis. And that would take us 2 to 3 days. And I'd have to physically download it, then load it into ArcGIS, and then I'd have to review it with some of our staff. And that's 3 days of work just to acquire this data. And so what I recommend is you guys find a very good SOP or method to pull your data and write some scripts to pull this data down faster. And so when we crunch 1 million parcels, we can do it now in 30 seconds. And that's a huge time saver. So when you're trying to use data for your business and you're constantly trying to pull it, QA, QC that, and you're burning a lot of staff resources, you want to move toward automation if possible. So I guess somebody's asking, would you please pass the address for the open data that you're talking about at some point? Yes, I'm happy to provide that in the Q&A. If you guys want data for City of Toronto or York region, pretty much type into Google City of Toronto open data. Or if you want York region data, type in region of York open data into Google, and it should bring you to that site. During the Q&A, I can go through that in more detail if some people are interested. Okay, next question. What is wrong with Toronto zoning open data? Let's see some votes here. I'm really excited about this one because this is a really fun one. And we'll see, some votes coming on. And somebody else asked a question while I'm waiting for these votes. How do you use open data crunching that you just mentioned if there's no problems? So we use, we can get a little technical, but we use databases. So I wouldn't, if you're trying to crunch any spatial data, I would not recommend ArcGIS for large data sets just because it takes too long and it crashes. So we use Postgres. You can use Oracle, you can use SQL, but databases allow you to be able to crunch data more effectively and larger amounts of data. So I guess what is wrong with Toronto data? And the answer to that is actually all four. And I didn't want to say all of the above because that's really boring, but yes. And actually, surprisingly, being Toronto zoning data is out of date, but it is slightly, but it actually, that isn't the main problem. A, B, and C is really wrong. And so I'm going to go through a couple examples on the screen right here. So if you guys can see the screen, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. But if you look at this metadata that we've downloaded from the City of Toronto zoning, you can see that they have all these explanations of the columns. But a lot of this data is kind of wrong. And so actually, the data here that we have, there's amendments or gaps where this does not hold true. So let me explain in a little more detail, because that probably didn't make too much sense. Is Z and zone is the category. So you can have a category like commercial residential, you could have parks, you could have transportation type of zoning, which is Z and zone. But you can't really tell that Z and zone means the category or the type. They don't really explain it here at all. So what did I have to do? I had to call the City of Toronto and then play around with the data until I got something that looked like their published data on their website. And another one, the Z and area and the unit counts, which describes the number of dwelling units permitted. We found out that this data is completely wrong. We actually used it, and a few of our clients pointed out that this information is completely wrong. And so we stopped using this column. But don't be surprised if the city or the municipality provides you data and they say it's 100% correct and it's really wrong. And this last one right here, Z in status, applies for areas that are amended. And this is very important because 50% of Toronto is amended, where there's so-called white gaps in the Google Maps data. And this took me 3 months to figure out. I didn't realize that this was so important, but the city never explained it to us. So that's one of the biggest problems we had, is we didn't know what these meant, and we didn't know that this ZN status is super important at the bottom here. Yeah, and so another problem you have here is a screenshot from the City of Toronto right here. This is their website, and so we try to replicate their website exactly as we see in our platform. But you can see these white gaps, which is here, which was the amendments, which I was talking about with ZN status. And the problem with this data is they didn't indicate all those amendments. So you can see here, former general zoning bylaw 7625 North York. So what we had to do in this situation was create our own data for these so-called amendments, and then we had to merge the City of Toronto zoning data with these amendment data. So that's an example of some problems that we're kind of facing here. And then I'm going to finish up.
Hey, Devin, just make it a bit more clear. What do those amendments actually mean? Like, how did they come to be? Do you have any idea?
And actually, Joseph, that's a really good question, actually. So I appreciate that. So these amendments come from two zoning bylaws being in existence. So there's the old one and the new one. And the only way to understand that is to kind of be a planner. And the way we figured out that there's data was wrong was we had to consult a planner. So I have an advisor who works with the City of Toronto for the last 10 years, and he looked at our data, and he was kind of a beta user, and he ran through our platform, and he said, hey, you're missing all these so-called amendments. Why isn't that in there? And that's when I realized I had a big problem. So I guess on a business side, to answer kind of Joseph's question, is that you really have to know your data, and then you have to consult experts in that field who understand whatever you're doing. So if you're doing real estate, if you're doing census data, if you're doing analysis for retail shops, you should talk to these kind of potential customers and make sure your open data is correct. And Joseph, did I answer that question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I guess we're hitting a little bit of time on here, so I'm going to move a little faster. But once again, symbology. This is the City of Toronto symbology, but they did not provide that, as a lot of people voted. No symbology was provided, so we had to make our own, which is somewhat painful. And we had to try to guess these yellow colors. And so I guess there's three things that you have to remember for using open data for businesses is, as we always have this, is data acquisition, which I talked about earlier, data analysis and cleaning, which I just showed you right there with the zoning problems, and data visualization. How do we visual data that's really easy to use for a lot of other people? So my last question, and I might skip over a little bit of this, just a background is we were able to pull something called Section 37 data, which is how much each developer pays in fees to the municipality. And we pulled it off of this public council minutes site. And then we were trying to pull that public data and then put it on a Google Maps site. So was the most time consuming process A, acquiring the data, B, extracting the data, C, writing scripts to map that visually on Google Maps, or D, correct some of this, correct the errors in the data that the City of Toronto published? So yeah, I'm seeing some votes in, so please vote on your poll. I'm going to vote myself just for fun. And that's correct. So it's D. D is correcting errors in the data. It was the most time-consuming process. So really quickly, if you look at this data right here, it looks really easy, and it looks really easy to use. And you're like, oh, there's no problems with this data. It has the addresses and all these benefits, and it's a straight PDF. But we found out right here, further down, that there is all these errors in the data, like who puts pound for certain data, and that's no way we could take that data in. So, you know, as a startup or as a business, you're like, I really need to make sure and ensure that this data is quality. You do not want to be putting pound signs and giving this to your clients. You do not want to be selling this with wrong information and just say, oh, it wasn't my fault. The City of Toronto published that data. So that's why you really have to make sure that's important. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to just kind of run you guys through a quick 5-minute demo of our platform on the visual side. Joseph, feel free to cut me off if we start running out of time. I don't want to bore you guys too much. But here's the MapYourProperty theme, and I'm just going to jump right to our platform. So here we are. We have over 35 different data sets, 35 to 45 different data sets. And this is our visual platform right here. And the biggest thing in showing open data is easy to use. This platform is web-based, no installation installed, and it's so lightweight you can use your 3G mobile connection. And the reason we did this is because previous applications were too cumbersome for businesses to consume. You got to remember, businesses are using like a Lenovo computer. They're using IE9. If you're at a bank, their internet's probably slow, and they're probably using Windows 7 or even Windows XP. So you can simply type in an address. Let's do 49 Mutual Street right here in this address bar, and you can see it auto-completing. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hit this search. And what you see is a Google Maps API, which we've decided to use because it's easy to use. And all these lines is property lines. So that's the million properties that we have mapped. And you can also see, as you zoom in right here, you can see that we've taken the address open data and mapped it right here. So you can see 100, you can see right here 100, which is City of Toronto. And then when I click here, this brings up my address right here. And so what you guys are seeing is the Toronto official plan, which is all the land uses. And we've overlaid it on this Google Maps platform. And one of the biggest important things is we have a legend here on the right-hand side. It indicates all these colors. So I don't know if you guys live in Toronto, but red is where you can put all the condos, office buildings. The yellow is where all your neighborhoods live, your little bungalows. And then you can see kind of the DVP coming down right here. And it's really easy. We have these tabs, these simple tabs as you hover down that allow you to go through all the different open data. So I go through here. This is urban structure maps, which is another type of map. This is the zoning we talked about right here. Very easy to see. We cleaned it up a lot. These are all the developments in Toronto that are going on right now. And then we have all the M&R data, which is water, rivers that are coming in, and wetlands, wooded areas, all any environmental issues we pull from the Ministry of Natural Resources. And then the last one is planning data on the provincial level, which is also from the Ministry of Natural Resources. So we make it very easy to click through, all these things to get that information. And so I think we only have 5 minutes left before I hand it over. So I'm just going to go back to one of our addresses, Mutual Street. There we go. And so this is a big development site that a lot of people are looking at. And so you can see quickly on this left-hand sidebar, we found this is very important because people have a lot of data, right? But they have a lot of data and you see it visually, but they want to just know what the designation is. So this is what's so great about our open data platform is we have some scripts that will say, hey, you're in mixed use on this left-hand side, on this left-hand bar, OP designation mixed use. And we show the color there. So some of you guys really have to listen to what your businesses and what your consumers want. And they told us we want a sidebar like this that tells us, I click on a property and it'll tell me exactly what is in there, what is on there. I don't want to know what's nearby. I want to know this is mixed use. If you see, if I click institutional, the sidebar dynamically changes. And then we also have links to all of our sources because people don't always trust your data, right? So they want to feel that your data is accurate. You have reference links to these maps. So we have these maps right to the City of Toronto data to show those PDF maps. So that's one big thing is having references, indication of your data sources. And then my last thing I'm going to show just before we finish up is our new application where we're pulling public data in. And these are all the condos and office buildings that are coming up around this property. So if I click this property right here, all this information about that development comes up. And then what's more exciting is that I can generate a report and it will show me an Excel sheet of all the information that's coming in. So that took about 2 seconds. And then we can, bottom left-hand corner is where I download the file. And then you can see this report and we have a map with numberings right here. I don't know if all of you guys can see that, but let me zoom it up a little bit bigger. But you can see, oh, number 4 development, number 38 development near my property. So I'm going to go to the development, and this is a raw output, and I'm going to go to number 4. And that's going to show me all the data and the type of development that is occurring. And just to finish up, also, we have this report that you can also generate also, which is a summary of all the open data sources that we have. And we have a script that automatically produces this in less than 30 seconds. And so the biggest thing we found for this report is it goes through kind of what does a planner need to know in order to develop a high-rise condo. And so it'll do a checklist that you see right here. Automatically, it'll go through land use, it'll go through zoning, it'll go through any Ontario provincial plans, it'll identify any water issues, environmental issues. I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see as I scroll through, these are all the policies that are outputted. And then one of the best things is a map. A map is automatically generated. And people love to visualize open data in a map. It's the easiest thing to see. You can look at it for 5 seconds. So some of our customers just use the maps. They copy the maps and they put it in our own report. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but you can see how lengthy this report is using public and open data sources, and once again, these maps. So I'm going to close this and close this, and that is pretty much the end of my presentation. These are all our data sources that we pull in onto the MapYourProperty online application. And so I'll leave this up for you guys if you guys have any more questions before I hand it over to Joseph. So Joseph, do you want to take it on?
Thank you so much, Devin. So before we talk a little bit about the ODX Ventures program, I just wanted to see, because that was an awful lot of information,
yeah,
if there's anyone with questions on MapYourProperty or on some of the challenges that Devin and the team had dealt with to clean open data and make it into this really usable product. So before we move on, does anyone else have questions about finding open data, dealing with it, cleaning it, turning it into an application that they might want to ask Devin?
Yeah. Oh. Anthony, good to see your questions. Good to hear from you. Okay. So I'm going to go through Anthony's first question. And Anthony, great hearing back from you again. I know we've chatted in the past. And yes, so our platform will expand easily into other areas besides Toronto and York region. Because we've developed the technology there, we're able to expand into Vancouver. We're actually looking to expand into California right now. And what's easy is you just need to swap all the data out. So Vancouver has official plan, so we're just going to swap instead of the Toronto official plan, we're going to just swap in the Vancouver plan. So once you have your architecture set up, using open data from different sources is pretty seamless. Of course, I've told you the caveats in the last slide of that. So I think, Laura, I kind of answered that question. You know, can we be used in another jurisdiction? We're actually testing some stuff in California, US. How many people are on our team and what are their skill sets? From John. So the first thing is I'm the kind of business and GIS planning lead. And then I also have a technical co-founder, and we have a team of 5 people. We're raising some money in Silicon Valley, and we're likely to add 3 or 4 more data scientists. As you can see, all that data is very time consuming to write some of those scripts. George asked, how are you dealing with outdated MNR stream network data? We've looked at the MNR stream network data, and they update it almost every 2 months. So we see that data in there, but I guess to preface it, that is, you always need disclaimers that when you're showing open data, that it is from the source and it is an indicator, but not your sole solution. So we tell our clients, you should not use our data and go submit a development application to the City of Toronto. We allow you to pre-screen key information that you need to do. And a lot of businesses should make sure that they do that. Joseph, do you want to moderate any of these? What other questions should I pick up, I guess?
Sure, 1 second here. So we've talked about MNR. I think it would be really interesting, and I know Dan and Laura, there are a couple of big questions there. But one question, for the interest of time, that I think people might find interesting is, can you talk just a bit about your data pipeline and to Faraz's point, what your tech stack is like?
Yeah. I guess, let me see how I can summarize this. So we use a lot of open source data. We just use a basic LAMP stack to get kind of technical, but once again, we use Postgres as an open source database. And we found that very stable, and it allows us to consume a lot of open data that is in shape files or CAD files. They're very supportive of that. For geospatial data, I would highly recommend using Postgres to analyze that data. For large corporations, you know, that are a lot bigger, they might use SQL databases, but for a lot of early guys, I'd recommend Postgres to do that. But
have you just written some scripts that fetch data sets and parse them and load them into Postgres yourself, or are you using any kind of like ETL tools as well?
We don't. We've written all those scripts ourselves, to be truthful. And with open data, we found that it is best to write those. You know, there's GeoCortex. There's a lot of other data out there, but it depends what kind of company you are. If you're a large company, you know, using a lot of standardized software like ArcGIS or Oracle, you might want to go that route. As a smaller company, a lean startup with, you know, very few developers, we wrote a lot of the scripts ourselves.
Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So I think we're going to put a pin in it here. And folks, I know there are still questions in the chat. And so, Devin, I don't know what your time is like, but if after Michael wraps up, you feel comfortable continuing on in the chat, that would be awesome. If not, when I go back to my desk, I'll try and reply to Merdad and Dan and Laura and some of the other folks we haven't had a chance to address.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the time and the presentation. It's really helpful to see, and it's amazing to see how you guys overcame some challenges in open data. I think it kind of goes to show us that we take a lot of this stuff for granted, but it is still pretty immature in terms of the open data ecosystem. It's pretty immature, and so there's a lot of very basic things you have to do to a data set before you can start building applications on top of it.
Yes, definitely. Unfortunately, open data isn't as easy as you think, but I think you know, in comparison to just finish it off, you think about trying to digitize or acquire data manually yourself. It would take years. For one data set, it took us 3 months to acquire that data manually. And then when it came out as open data, it was 3 clicks. So the amount of time it saves for open data is enormous. It is still a very, you know, it might be a little raw and need some connections, but you know, trying to do that manually, like I know a lot of firms, big firms do that, is just way too much time. And a startup like us would never be able to do that.
Great. Well, I think with that, then we'll turn it back to Michael, and Michael's going to chat a little bit about ODX Ventures and that program and how startups working with open data can benefit from that.
Yeah, thanks, Joseph. I'm just trying to pull my presentation up. Does Devin have to unshare? Or?
I think Devin switched it back to you.
He switched back to me?
Do. Okay.
So if you try going to PowerPoint, let's see what happens here.
Are you guys seeing my screen or not? Not yet. Okay.
Let's see for 1 second.
So
let's try. Go back now for a sec. I think Devin is still on screen. That's why. So you're right. You have to kick Devin out. No, just scroll further down, and there's a way to get rid of him.
We have to get rid of you, Devin.
The mouse over there. Maybe he may have just dropped off himself.
Here.
No, we'll just mouse over there. Okay, it's gone now. All right, let's see what's going on here. So it says it's sharing. Try turning video on for a sec. Hopefully it doesn't actually turn video on.
It's turning video.
Hi. This is interesting. Let me try for 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that. Whoa! Okay. At least they didn't open anything too embarrassing.
All right, can everyone see my screen now? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna to kind of do what Devin did, and instead of blowing it up into full screen, I'm just going to open it up so I can see the chat menu as well. And if everyone can see, I'm going to proceed, and if there's any technical glitches, let me know in the chat. But I'm here to talk about the ODX Ventures program. Very excited to let you guys know about the program overview and what it's all about. So as Devin indicated, he is an open data user, and as such, his business is built on aspects of open data. And as a result of that, we would like to encourage, as part of ODX, for more businesses out there to use open data, even though, as we discussed in the previous conversation, that there might be some pain in the butt aspects of doing so, but we would still like to encourage that as much as possible. And in order to facilitate that, what this program allows you to do is to obtain up to $50,000 in funding support for your project in this area. So basically, the funding is used to look at projects that will help your business grow. And this could be in an area of product development. It could be helping in terms of market traction. But as you can imagine, we're probably after the same things that you are in terms of the business. We want to see revenue increase for your company. We want to see job growth as a result of this particular endeavor. And the money is applied as a non-repayable contribution. And it could be used to obtain resources and professional services to help support your project. So who qualifies for this, and what are the requirements? So we are specifically targeting startups and SMEs as part of this program. And no surprise, we want to ensure that applicants use Canadian government open data as part of the business solution and as part of the project moving forward. And you as a business do have a requirement in order to match the funding on a minimum of at least a 1-to-1 ratio. And I'll go through that a little bit more in the FAQs later on. And fact of the matter is, if we provide as part of the request in the application, like $40,000 in funding, we expect an in-kind match from your business of $40,000 as well. So how to apply? There's a link on this presentation, which we'd be more than happy to send out at a later time. And this link provides more information on the program itself. And at the same time, it also has a link on that page to the application form. The deadline for application is midnight on October the 28th. And what we're going to be doing after that is we're going to be reviewing the applications, and we have a ODX advisory board, and we will involve the advisory board as well in reviewing the applications. We will pick successful applicants for this program, and we will inform them after the review process. And my estimations right now is that we probably will have successful applicants decided prior to the end of November. Okay. So going into FAQs a little bit, I always get asked by what open data means, and specifically government open data. And I think most of the people on this particular webinar understand and get it. But I just kind of wanted to go quickly into this a little bit, in the sense that from an open data standpoint, you qualify if you use any type of government open data, regardless whether it's on a municipal level, provincial, or federal level. Okay, and the application form asks you to kind of outline and detail that out a little bit for us, but that's fine. And it doesn't solely have to be open data as well. It could be used in conjunction with other data sets, or internally with your own company data if you wish, right? So just some examples that, Devin's company, MapYourProperty, is a perfect example of that. We have another company that, we know of that use weather data as part of their solution set in warning homeowners of potential flooding. I mean, that's perfectly okay as well. There's education companies out there that use retention rates and graduation rates that are published by the provincial government, and that's perfectly okay also. So just think about some of the data sets that are out there, and you know, how they could be incorporated as part of your solution set going forward, and see if there is any way that from a product development standpoint or from a market traction standpoint, a project could be wrapped around those data sets in order to help your company grow. So a question that I've had with regards to this program is intellectual property ownership. From the ODX standpoint, we don't want to own your intellectual property, and just want to make it clear up front that the IP can rest with your company as part of this program. So some other questions with regards to funding, and more specifically what funding support means. So as part of the monies that we're using for this particular program, we cannot provide money directly into your company. So what we can do is we can help support activities such as if you are requiring programmers in order to develop a feature set for your platform, we can go out and hire a third-party contractor to help with the programming for that particular feature set. If you require hardware, let's say for proof of concept or something like that, we can go out and purchase hardware for you, but at the same time, that hardware still remains after the project as a property of ODX. So those are things that you can apply the funding support to. And what do we mean by an in-kind match? So from an in-kind match standpoint, what we're looking for is that we are looking for a contribution from your company of a monetary nature that will match the funding that we provide. So as an example, if you're putting in labor towards the project, your cost of labor is legitimate in terms of a in-kind match. If you are putting technology that requires licensing costs towards the project, that license cost also is a legitimate in-kind match. So those are some of the things of what we're talking about with regards to an in-kind match to this particular program. And I already went through the review process very quickly. We will be using our advisory board, and we do anticipate hopefully telling the successful applicants and notifying them prior to the end of November. So that's very quickly the Open Data Ventures program. Again, more than happy to send you the information with regards to this. The other caveat to note is that due to our funding partner, which is FedDev, again, it is open to Ontario-based companies. Okay, so I'll open it up right now. If there's any questions, I'd be more than happy to take it in the chat. No? Okay. So anybody in Ontario would be eligible for this. Devin Tu said 1 sec. I'm in anticipation.
Well, this is worth an explanation, I think. So maybe we can talk a bit more about that.
So yeah, so basically the question was more about the in-kind match. So first off, what we are anticipating as part of the application is that you will tell us how much of in-kind funding you require. How much in funding you require for your particular project. And some companies might come in at 20,000 or 30,000. All we're specifying here is that in terms of the program itself, we will fund up to $50,000 for that particular project. Now, from the $50,000 standpoint, if we use that as an example, we are anticipating that the company, Devin, would provide an in-kind match of minimum $50,000. If you want to provide an in-kind match in excess of $50,000, that's fine. It's just that based on the reporting that we need for our government partners, we need to see at least a minimum of a 1-to-1 match for the funding that's provided. Okay, so in terms of the types of things that could be used for in-kind matching, I've described some of them. Like labor, obviously, is a potential. And Devin, if you know you need to open up the platform in order for like a third-party person to develop on it, and they need to be accessed the license or something like that, I mean that could be used also as a potential in-kind match. So there are certain things like that that we could look at in terms of matching contributions. Not clear on the qualification requirements regarding a subject matter expert incorporated in Ontario. Okay, so getting back to the Ontario question, so we are looking for companies that are registered as companies in Ontario that can apply for this particular program. So in terms of who can actually be used as third parties, is that I kind of guess that's the question. So if you take someone outside our province, I think I'd have to check on that one, but I think probably that would be okay, right? It's just the company itself needs to be doing business in Ontario. Yeah, have an office here, yeah.
That's an interesting question.
So I think from the standpoint of the application with regards to open data, whether it's products and services made from open data or simply have used open data at some point in their product development, I think from the application standpoint, if you are going down the project, if you're going down the path of initiating a project, you have to demonstrate how open data is being used to help your company move to that next level, right? So if you're saying that open data helped you get to this particular level now, and the remaining work that you are going to be doing don't really use open data, I think there's less of a case than if you basically say that you will either continue to use open data or different sets of open data in order to help your company to continue to grow. Any other questions? And SMEs is small, medium enterprises. So sorry for the acronyms. So I'll tell you what, like, I think after this presentation, Joseph will probably send out the deck.
Yes, yeah.
We will send out more information with regards to contact information, things like that. So if you wanted to email me directly with your questions, feel free to do so. I'd be more than happy to answer your questions.
Thanks, Michael. And like Mordad and Anne, I see there's still some more questions left. I'll jump into chat once we end the call, and we can chat about this as well. Thank you very much, everyone. This, as Michael said, we'll send a link around with the link to the archive of the webinar. And again, if you're using an open data set at all at your company and haven't already filled out the OD150, please do so. And finally, keep an eye out for our newsletter and for a notice about the next webinar coming up, probably on Tuesday, December 6th. Thanks so much.